Okay, mate, so I've loaded up a quick tactical engagement for Mavericks. It's a two-ship, so we can fly it together, but I'll be flying this alone. With an AI wingman, anyway. But okay, so if we look at the 2D map, I'll be taking off at Suwon Air Base, flying roughly northeast to my steer 2, and then I'll be turning northwest up to steer 3, where I have placed a couple of armoured battalions, and I've actually given them orders to move down to roughly where steer 4 is along this road, so they shouldn't be too difficult to locate when we get there. Now what you can do on the 2D screen before you start any mission really is, if you right click and then select ground units, you can decide what level of detail you want, and I usually put it on battalions because it's a little bit more accurate when looking for battalion size units. You can choose which kind of units you want shown: combat, air defense and support. What air units you want shown, I've got them all. Installations, I've got them all. You can show threat circles, so high altitude, low altitude, radar coverage. You can see it changed there. The high altitude radar coverage is pretty much the whole map, but if you were to put radar coverage low altitude, it's slightly less. Air defense system, high altitude. There isn't any air defenses placed because I've designed this T, so there's no enemy threats from the air or from SAMs. So what you can do from this screen then before you go is, if you have intelligence and the units are actually shown on your map, because they aren't always, we'll just know they're roughly in this area somewhere. Let's just stop that timer actually, so it stops the units moving. Is you can right click on a unit, you can bring up its status, so it'll tell you what's in that unit. So we're looking at 18 T-62s and various other support vehicles. Tells you the unit's experience, its supply rating, its morale and all that kind of stuff. We've even got its orders, look. What we can also do is, if we right click, we can recon the unit, and this is quite useful, not always but quite useful. Just wait for it to come up. Select the unit. You can also go down to individual vehicles within that unit, but what you can do with this is you can alter your viewing angle like this, zoom in and out, but you can see that that battalion is in roughly column formation, look, going all the way up there, north to south, and they very rarely do that, but on a north to south, exact north to south heading, but that's the way I placed them for ease. So you can recon. These buttons are used for setting up target steer points, which I'll explain on when we talk about laser guided bombs and anyway, guided bombs, guided munitions. But we don't need to do anything with this with Mavericks. So we'll come out of that. Check our loadouts. Briefing screen
Alright,
first.
listen up.
So we can see from our briefing that the target area is between steers 3 and 4. And we're carrying 6 AGM 65Ds, air to air, doesn't really matter about that. A couple of wing tanks, and what's quite important is to look at this weather screen here, and weather on takeoff doesn't really matter, not now that you can do an ILS landing anyway, it doesn't make any difference to you now, but what is important to us, especially with Mavericks, is the weather at the target. And for us today it's going to be sunny, so it's not going to cause us any problems, but if it was if we had poor weather at the target area, it could cause us problems using Mavericks, because they use a TV screen, a TV camera to guide them, and if that's obscured by cloud or weather, you're not going to be able to lock onto targets, or the weapon's going to have difficulty tracking them. So if we had a low cloud base, say 5,000 feet, then obviously you'd have to fly below 5,000 feet to track your targets, which is going to bring you within the range of the AAA that is escorting the battalion, and they can fly up to about 15,000 feet, so hard deck, you shouldn't really break 15,000 when you're going after armoured battalions like this. But anyway, it's sunny, so it doesn't make any difference to us. So we'll come out of that. Check our loadout screen. I'm sure you already know how to change all of this, so I'll not bore you with the details. But one thing I will go through is we're carrying AGM 65 Deltas. There are Bravos. I think there's Alphas as well on this now. Alphas and Bravos are just fitted with a TV camera, sorry, on the front of the weapon there, and it's on a gimbal, so it can look to a certain angle, up, down, left, right. The difference between Alphas and Bravos and then Deltas is that the Deltas are fitted with infrared as well as normal TV, so it makes it easier to spot. And then there's also Golfs, which are basically a 65D, but they're bigger, and they're used for large buildings or shipping, that sort of thing. You can see there, that's why you can only carry 2 as opposed to 6 of the Deltas. So there you go, we've got some air-to-air ordnance, not that we're going to need it because there isn't any air threats. 6 65 Deltas, a couple of wing tanks, and RECM pod. Oh, and a TGP. What's over on this screen here, this is really important when you're carrying air-to-ground ordnance, because you'll see a max G limit of 6.5, a minimum G of -2, and a maximum indicated airspeed of 600 knots. So it's really important that we don't break those parameters, because if we do, we're likely to cause damage to the weapons or the standpoint, the hard points, and you end up with weapons that don't detonate or hung stores. Well, that means when the weapon fails to come off the rail. So we need to be really strict about these parameters here: 6.5, -2, and 600. And it's probably a good idea to make a note of those. That's it for this screen, so we'll just click on OK. Set up our DTC comms. Always uniform 15 for tower comms. Set tower. Victor doesn't really matter, because I'm taking an AI wingman. Modes, I've put my TGP on my MFD1 along with the FCR for ground. MFD2, I've got SMS, HSD and weapon, so I need the weapon screen to control the Mavericks. Air to air, doesn't really matter, but it's your own preference. So save the DTC, and I'm going to commit to runway, because it's quicker, and I'll end up on the runway ready to take off. So here we go, a couple of seconds. And in we go. Okay, we're in the pit. So I'm just going to pause the sim for a minute just to point out a few things. My setup is an X55 Cytec hot ass, 2 Cougar MFDs, which are standalones. They're not attached to any screens or anything, they're just standalone, and a tablet, an Android tablet, which I use to extract the ICP, which is this instrument. That's displayed on the tablet, and also the scratch pad is displayed, and it means I don't have to use my mouse to press these buttons. I can just press it on the tablet. So quite often you'll see this screen. That means I'm looking down at my ICP. It's probably quite annoying for you, but anyway, there you go. So I'll freeze now rather than pause, and then I can set up some.
Tower, you are cleared for takeoff. Runway 14 left.
Yes, thank you. So first thing to do really when you get in the aircraft is to set up your data link, and you do that by pressing list, enter, and then it brings up your data link screen on the scratch pad here, and you can see that your own aircraft is call sign 10, which is flight 1 of a package. If they were an escort flight, the escort might be flight 20. If there was a SEAD flight in the package, they'd be 30. And your own ship is flight 1, seat number 1, so whatever we are, Cobra 11 or whatever. So if you press sequence, that'll take you through the data link where you can manually set other aircraft on there. Use your dobber down here to cycle through that screen, and what you'd want to put in then, say if you had an escort with you, you would want to put in the flight lead,
Cowboy,
which is
1-1,
call sign
Sioux
21.
Tower, expedite departure.
Yes, thank you. And maybe the element lead from that flight as well. Oh, sorry, press enter. And maybe the element lead 23. Press enter. Then if you had a SEAD flight, you'd want to perhaps put the flight lead on that. And then maybe if there was another strike flight in the package taking on a different target, you might want to put the flight lead in on that. So in all, you can have eight different flights or aircraft on your data link, which will show up on your FCR as well as your HSD, which is there. Oh, there. I normally keep the first four. I reserve those for aircraft in my own flight, and there's only 2 aircraft in this flight. There you go, there's my wingman. So the other 2 are blank. So once you've set that up, you want to press return to go back to the default screen. Next thing to do is set up your air-to-air TACAN, so I'm sure you know how to do that already. Sequence to switch to air-to-air. I know that in the single player game, the air-to-air TACAN for the flight lead is always 85 Yankee. So you press 0 to change band. Press return, and there you go, I'm manually set up, and he's 0 miles away from me because he's there, look. Next thing to do is go into air to ground mode. I've got it mapped to a button on my sticks, but it's this button here, and you'll see that the 65s are off. So if you power them on and then click on time up and then return, there's a timer started counting up there, and it takes about 4 minutes for these to warm up. So I'm just going to unpause the sim now, and we'll take off. Nose wheel steering off, throttle forward, off we go.
Cowboy, 1-1, is there a problem? Cowboy, 1-1, Sioux Tower, resume on navigation. Cowboy, 1-2, Sioux Tower, resume on navigation.
That's my wingman. Just going to send my wingman home because obviously he's AI and I don't need him. And I use voice activated controls for tower comms, wingman comms, AWACS comms, that sort of thing. So you'll hear me sending him home now. Wingman RTB.
Cowboy 1-2, return to base. Cowboy 1-2-2, I'm a dot.
Okay, so all I'm going to do now is just set my autopilot, and I'm going to switch uniform comms because the tower's really annoying. There you go. Right, so let's I don't need that on actually. Yeah, okay, so let's just sit and wait. So wait for the that to reach about 3.5-4 minutes, that timer, and then we know that the Mavericks are ready. In the meantime, I could be perhaps setting up my TGP by pressing standby and then air to ground in air to ground mode, and then if I switch to air mode by pressing standby and air to air again, come out of air to air, back to nav mode. Now you're probably already aware of this, but if you're in SMS or weapon screen, you can see that this number here, 3 and 7, that is the hardpoint number. So hardpoint number 3 and hardpoint number 7 are both carrying HM65Ds. If I was carrying a different kind of weapon, it would tell me there what they were carrying. So for example, if I come out of air to ground mode and go into SMS, there you go. You can see that I've got, there's my AGM 65Ds on the hardpoint, hardpoint 3 and 7. Tanks are there. Okay, if I go into A mode. Okay. Right, so anyway, let's come out of that. Go back into A to ground mode. Yeah, so there's, now it's the timed out. So I can reset my timer by pressing time and down. Return. Okay, now what I can do now is I'm on autopilot heading for steer 2, 25 miles away. So what I can do now is there's a system that you can use called bore sighting, where you bore sight the Maverick to the TGP, and the advantage that gives you is that you can engage targets at a much longer distance, so you maintain better standoff range. It's a little bit advanced, and it can be a little bit mind-blowing, so I'm not going to blind you with it with an explanation. I'll save that for another flight. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up that bore sight for myself anyway, because I do like to use it. It's good practice for me. So I'm just going to pause the recording for just a minute or two while I do that. Okay, I'm not going to pause the recording because it's not pausing, but I'm going to do my bore sight now. Okay, that's me bore sighted, so okay, right. The important thing to remember with Mavericks is once you've switched them on, they can hold power for about an hour. So don't switch them on too early. The other issue to remember is that if you've uncaged them like I have here, then they'll only last for about half an hour. So it's good to switch them off until you need them. So I'm going to go back into nav mode, and I think we'll just cut the corner for steer 3. So it is. So I'm expecting the 2 tank battalions to be moving between steer 3, which is there, and steer 4, which is there. So you can see that you can see from this set of numbers here that I'm heading for steer 3, and it's 36 miles away, 35.8 to be precise. And that's repeated there. Look. What's not on the helmet mounted display is the fact that at this speed it'll take me 5 minutes 25 seconds to get there. So we'll just we'll level out at 20,000 and wait to get there. I'll speed things up a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to pause things again. So we're at 25 miles now, so what I'm going to do is show you now how to use your Mavericks. Now this, in fact I'll freeze it rather than pause. Okay, there's if we switch to air to ground mode and power on our Mavericks again, it won't take 4 minutes this time for them to time out to warm up. Oh, there you go, they warmed up already. Now there are 3 modes that you can use Mavericks in. the most common mode is pre, which means that you use the FCR in conjunction with your weapons page to lock up targets. The next mode is what's called Viz, which doesn't use the FCR. In fact, you can see that it's switched off, and it's visual mode. So you look out your window, you pick up a target, you slew your cursor onto that target, lock it up, and then once you're in range, you fire. And then the third mode is called bore sight mode, which also slaves the FCR, but also uses let me see if I can. There you go. So it uses the FCR. There you go. So that's the FCR. But it also then, once you've locked a target with the FCR, like that. Oh no, it's not locked. Let me see. Like that. It then uses the you can then slew your weapon sight to that target on your FCR. But the problem with that is it's not slaved to the FCR, so it's a little bit more difficult. There is a time and a place to use it, but it's not used very often, and I use it very rarely. For the most parts, you'll generally use the pre-sight mode, which is there. So okay, so I've just pressed CZ on the FCR, which means cursor 0, which takes me back, my FCR back to looking at the current steer point. Now then, so we've got pre-mode and viz mode, which is the most common uses for Mavericks. The difference then is you need to go onto your FCR to this GM button. Now GM means stationary targets, so the radar is looking for stationary targets, and all these little white dots they represent stationary targets such as buildings and bridges and that kind of thing. So if we press that GM button, that'll bring us up with another series of buttons on the right. So we're already on GM. GMT means moving targets. If I press that, the radar will then start scanning for anything that's moving at roughly 5 miles an hour or more. And there's another one, C mode. So if we press C, it'll look for ships. So let's go to GMT. So we can see already that there's a couple of targets over in this area. If I zoom in on that as well, there's a couple of targets there that we're looking at. So what I can do on pre-mode is I can lock one up, and it automatically switches the sensor of interest to the Maverick weapons page, and you can just see those little white dots. They represent vehicles. Now at the moment I can't identify what they are, but this is why it's good to carry a TGP. So if you switch to TGP, make that the sensor of interest, already I can see, I'm actually maximum zoomed in, but I can see that those two vehicles that I'm looking at on the weapons page are in fact tanks. So you don't want to be locking up on the TGP now, because well, you can do, but we're not covering that on this this flight. I'll go over that on a different flight. And if you lock up on those TGPs, you'll attempt to do what's called a Maverick handoff, but we're not going to cover that today. So switch back to your FCR, lock them back up. It'll then switch directly to the Maverick page, and you're flying towards. Once you get into within, I don't know, about 14 miles, you'll be able to lock them up on this weapons page, and then engage. So I'll unpause the sim, and here we go. We'll turn on to those. Oh, there you go. It's a nice column there. Look, you can see two nice columns. Okay, very very noticeable. Crossing each other by the looks of it. So if we line up on that that steer line, that is now where my FCR is looking at. But my weapons page isn't. Okay, my weapons page isn't locked up on anything just yet. So what you can do is try and zoom in onto something, TMS up to lock. It's not doing anything because I'm too far away. We're still, yeah, 18.7 miles away. We'll be able to lock at about 14 miles, depending on our altitude. So we'll just keep flying towards that set of targets. 16 miles. Let's try another lock. No, it's not doing it. Okay, so we're within 14 miles now, so let's try again. And there you go, we got our lock. Now, I need to pause it again here. Now, it's really important this. In order to fire Mavericks, you need to have your aircraft in what's called the keyhole. And it's basically, if I use the weapons page, it's basically a keyhole shaped area around that target. And what you want to do is this cross, you need to have that within the keyhole. And also you need to be flying at a certain speeds. I would say no less than 300 knots and no more than 380 knots to fire Mavericks. And as long as you're in that keyhole and within that speed, this cross will be steady. If it's flashing and you fire, you're probably going to miss. If it's fixed, then you're probably going to hit. I think I've locked onto the wrong target. Actually, I want to lock onto that first one because I know it's a tank. So I'm going to unpause, unlock that target, move up to those first two, lock it up. Now I've got a steady cross, but I'm not in range yet, and the reason is I know that is because this marker here where it says 13, once it gets into this vertical bar, I know I'm within range to fire. So I need to wait until that gets to within range. It's also repeated on the HUD here, so you haven't got to take your eyes off the HUD. So we're within range, but let's let it go down a bit. And oh, I've got a flashing cross, so I know I'm going to miss. There you go, steady and fire. So I've automatically switched to my next hard point. So let's lock on to the next target. There you go. I've got a flashing cross, so I'm not in the keyhole. Steady, no, flashing, steady, fire. Okay, now it's good practice to just fire two, then come off and get yourself a bit of distance between your targets. What you can do is uncage your next weapon, switch to the opposite steer point, uncage that one. You do that by pressing missile step, whatever key you've got that assigned to. And what you can also do is use RTGP to look at those targets to see if our missiles go in. And what's good about the TGP as well is it'll show you just here. This number here is your range to what you're looking at, and we can see I'm about 10 miles away. So there's the targets. Those are the two I locked up on. So there you go. One. Next one should go in very soon. And two. There you go. So that's the first two hit. So I'm now 12 miles out. You can just see on the TGP just there. So should be able to see some smoke actually when we turn back in. So let's turn in for the next lot. Switch back to FCR. We don't want to be locking up targets on the TGP. Remember to control altitude. We don't want to be breaking 15,000 hard deck. So there we go, we're on the steer line. I'm just trying to see if there's any smoke. Can't see any. Okay, let's lock up that column again on the FCR. It's automatically switched to weapons page. So yes, I can see there's that column there again. Okay, let's select a couple of targets. They look like tanks. So fixed cross, fire. Next one. Flashing cross, not ready to fire. Probably a bit slow actually. Okay, let's unlock it. And lock up again. There you go, fixed cross, fire. 2 gone, let's come off again. Use a TGP to look at that. There they are. That's the first lot. That beeping you can hear is there's an air radar that's tracking me. It's probably an AWACS or something like that. Oh, you can see my missile going in there. There you go, impact. Should get the next one in a few seconds. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch to Viz mode because just to show you that how you use that as well. It's not just pre-mode. Okay, we're not bother waiting for the we'll not bother waiting for the next one to go in. Let's just turn on. Okay, so switch to in fact we'll keep on pre for now, so we can acquire the target using the steer line. Let's uncage the missiles, so we're not trying to do too many things at once. Okay, and we'll switch to Viz mode. There we go. Right, so we know that roughly, there you go, you can see the smoke there. So we know that in that area we're probably going to find some vehicles. So if we slew that box around the HUD to that area and then switch to the use this page here, use the weapon page, we can see, let's zoom in actually, field of view button, zoom in, lock up, there, lock.